The echo of laughter still rang in Emma's ears as she stood frozen in the doorway of her sister's luxurious penthouse apartment. What should have been a simple family dinner had turned into the most humiliating moment of her 32 years of life. Her sister Rachel, draped in designer clothes and dripping with jewelry, had just finished giving what she called the tour to her new boyfriend David, a tour that included a particularly cruel commentary about Emma's living situation. "Hello, I'm Tina, and I'm here with you today to share a story that will make your heart race and maybe even bring tears to your eyes. It's about Emma, a woman who discovered that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who give us the greatest gift, the burning desire to prove them wrong. You're going to witness an incredible transformation, a journey of revenge that's so satisfying you won't believe it's real. Stay with me until the very end, because what Emma does will leave you absolutely speechless. If you enjoy stories about justice and sweet revenge, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more incredible tales like this one." The evening had started innocently enough. Rachel had invited Emma over to meet David, a successful real estate developer she'd been dating for 3 months. Emma had arrived with a homemade apple pie and genuine excitement to finally meet this mystery man her sister had been gushing about. She'd even worn her best dress, a simple navy blue number she'd bought on sale 6 months ago, but still made her feel confident and pretty. Rachel's apartment was everything Emma's wasn't. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city's glittering skyline, marble countertops gleamed under designer lighting, and every piece of furniture screamed expensive taste. Emma had always admired her sister's success as a marketing executive, but tonight something felt different. There was a coldness in Rachel's smile, a sharpness in her voice that Emma had never noticed before. "And this," Rachel had said, gesturing dramatically toward Emma as if she were part of the apartment tour, "is my little sister Emma. She's still trying to figure out life, aren't you, Em? She lives in this tiny little apartment across town. You know, one of those places where you can touch both walls if you stretch your arms out wide." David had laughed politely, clearly uncomfortable with Rachel's tone. But Rachel wasn't finished. She continued with increasing cruelty. "Emma's always been the dreamer in our family. While I was building my career and making real money, she was busy with her little hobby jobs and romantic notions about life. She actually thinks her cramped apartment is cozy. Isn't that precious?" The words hit Emma like physical blows. She felt her cheeks burning with shame and her throat closing with unshed tears. This wasn't playful sibling teasing. This was deliberate humiliation. Rachel knew exactly how hard Emma had worked to afford her small one-bedroom apartment. She knew about the extra shifts Emma pulled at the accounting firm, the way she carefully budgeted every dollar, the pride Emma felt in finally having her own space after years of roommates and uncertainty. "Rachel, that's enough," David said quietly, his discomfort now obvious to everyone in the room. But Rachel was on a roll, emboldened by what she perceived as her audience's attention. "I keep telling her she should move back in with Mom and Dad, save some money instead of throwing it away on rent for that shoebox. I mean, what's the point of paying for something so small and cheap when you could live for free in a real house?" Emma found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "My apartment isn't cheap, Rachel. I work hard to afford it, and it means something to me to have my own place." Rachel waved her hand dismissively, the gesture made even more insulting by the massive diamond ring she wore. "Oh, please, Emma. We both know it's basically a glorified closet in a building that's probably older than we are. David, you should see this place. It's the kind of building that makes you wonder how it's still standing." That was the moment Emma's embarrassment transformed into something harder and more dangerous. Her sister didn't just disapprove of her choices. She was actively trying to humiliate her in front of a stranger, using her financial struggles as entertainment. Emma realized with crystal clarity that Rachel saw her as less than, as someone whose dreams and efforts were worthy of mockery. "You know what, Rachel?" Emma said, her voice steadier now. "You're right about one thing. My apartment is small and the building is old, but it's mine, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished to get it." Rachel laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or sisterly affection. "Accomplished? Emma, you rent a tiny apartment in a rundown building. That's not an accomplishment, that's settling for mediocrity." Emma set her purse on the marble counter with deliberate calm. She looked around the penthouse one more time, taking in every detail of Rachel's perfect life, every symbol of the success her sister wielded like a weapon. "I should go," she said quietly. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Rachel said. But there was no apology in her voice, no recognition of the damage she'd caused. As Emma walked toward the elevator, she heard David's voice behind her, low and disapproving as he spoke to Rachel. But she didn't turn back. She had heard enough, felt enough humiliation for one evening. The elevator doors closed, and Emma found herself alone with her reflection and her rage. By the time she reached the ground floor, something fundamental had shifted inside her. Her sister wanted to play games about real estate and success? Fine. Emma was ready to play, and she was going to win in a way that would make Rachel's cruel words come back to haunt her forever. Emma's hands trembled as she inserted her key into the lock of her shoebox apartment, Rachel's mocking words still echoing in her mind. As she stepped inside, she looked around with fresh eyes, not seeing the cozy space she'd worked so hard to create, but seeing it through Rachel's judgmental gaze. The living room that doubled as her home office, the kitchen barely big enough for one person, the single bedroom that held all her dreams and possessions. For a moment, the shame threatened to overwhelm her again. But then, Emma noticed something Rachel had never bothered to learn about her life. On her small desk sat stacks of carefully organized financial documents, investment statements, and business plans. While Rachel saw only a struggling little sister playing house, Emma had been quietly building something much bigger. She wasn't just an accountant at a small firm. She was a woman who understood money, who had spent years learning about investments, real estate markets, and financial strategy, while Rachel was busy spending her high salary on designer handbags and expensive dinners. Emma sat down at her laptop and opened the files she'd been working on for months. She had been researching investment opportunities in undervalued properties, particularly older apartment buildings in transitioning neighborhoods. Her small salary had limited her options, but her grandmother's recent inheritance, a sum Rachel knew nothing about, had changed everything. $60,000 wasn't a fortune, but in the right hands and with the right strategy, it could be the seed money for something substantial. She pulled up the file she'd been studying for weeks. 847 Maple Street, the exact building where she lived. The property was owned by Hartford Management Company, and Emma knew from her research that they were struggling financially. The building was profitable but required significant maintenance updates that the current owners couldn't afford. They'd been quietly looking for a buyer for 6 months, but the asking price of $400,000 had scared away most investors who saw only the building's flaws rather than its potential. What made Emma's situation unique was her insider knowledge. She knew every tenant, understood the building's income potential, and had already identified which apartments could command higher rent with modest improvements. She'd calculated that with her $60,000 down payment and a commercial loan, she could not only buy the building, but improve it enough to increase its value by 30% within 2 years. But Emma's plan went deeper than simple real estate investment. She opened another file on her computer, this one containing detailed research on every property in Rachel's exclusive neighborhood. She discovered something interesting. Rachel didn't own her penthouse. She rented it at the astronomical rate of $4,000 per month from a company called Prestige Properties LLC. More importantly, Prestige Properties was facing serious financial difficulties due to several failed developments and was quietly putting buildings up for sale to cover their debts. Emma's heart raced as she connected the dots. If she could successfully purchase and improve 847 Maple Street, she could use the equity and profit to pursue bigger opportunities. The building Rachel lived in was expensive, yes, but it was also poorly managed and underperforming. With the right approach and enough capital, it could be acquired and transformed into something much more profitable. She called her financial advisor, Margaret, who had helped her navigate her grandmother's inheritance. "Margaret, it's Emma. I know it's late, but I need to move forward with the Maple Street property. Can you connect me with that commercial lender you mentioned?" Margaret's voice was encouraging. "Emma, I've been hoping you'd make this decision. That property is a gold mine waiting for someone with vision. Your analysis was brilliant, and frankly, you understand that building better than any outside investor could. Let me make some calls tomorrow morning." As Emma hung up, she realized this was about more than revenge against Rachel's cruelty. This was about proving to herself that she was capable of extraordinary things. Her sister saw her small apartment as evidence of failure, but Emma was about to transform it into the foundation of an empire. She spent the rest of the night refining her business plan, calculating renovation costs, and preparing her loan application. By morning, she had a comprehensive strategy that would not only make her the owner of her building, but position her for future acquisitions. Rachel thought Emma's apartment was embarrassingly small. Soon, Emma would own the entire building, and she'd be collecting rent from every tenant who had ever looked down on her modest home. The irony was perfect, and Emma felt a smile playing at the corners of her mouth for the first time since that horrible dinner. Rachel had unknowingly given her the greatest gift possible, the absolute certainty that she needed to stop playing small. Emma was done being the struggling little sister, done accepting crumbs when she was capable of owning the whole bakery. If you're enjoying Emma's journey from heartbreak to empowerment, I'd love to have you join our community here. Hit that subscribe button because stories like these remind us all that we're capable of so much more than others believe. And please, share in the comments below. Have you ever had someone underestimate you so completely that it became your fuel for success? I read every comment, and I love hearing your stories of triumph. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in the lobby of her building, holding the deed in her slightly shaking hands. The purchase had moved faster than she'd ever imagined possible. Hartford management had been so eager to sell that they'd accepted her offer of $380,000, $20,000 below asking price, and agreed to a quick closing. Her commercial lender had been impressed with her detailed business plan and insider knowledge of the property's potential. "Congratulations, Miss Thompson," said James Rodriguez, her real estate attorney. "You're now the official owner of 847 Maple Street. 12 units, fully occupied, and according to your projections, this should provide excellent cash flow within 6 months of your planned improvements." Emma nodded, still somewhat stunned by how quickly her life had transformed. One moment, she was Rachel's embarrassing little sister living in a cheap apartment, and now she was a property owner with a solid investment that was already generating monthly income. But more importantly, she was now Rachel's landlord, though her sister didn't know it yet. Emma had discovered during the closing process that Rachel's building, the luxurious Grandview Towers where she rented her penthouse, was indeed owned by the struggling Prestige Properties LLC. Even better, they were actively seeking a buyer and would likely accept a significantly reduced offer due to their financial distress. The building was worth approximately $2 million, but Emma's research suggested they might accept an offer as low as $1.4 million for a cash sale. The challenge was raising that kind of capital, but Emma had a plan. Over the next 6 months, she would implement her improvement strategy for 847 Maple Street, increasing both its rental income and its market value. She would then refinance the property, pulling out equity to fund her next, much larger acquisition. It was aggressive, but Emma had run the numbers dozens of times. It was absolutely achievable. Her first priority was meeting with her tenants, including herself, to discuss the upcoming improvements. Emma had decided to maintain her apartment in the building, partly for practical reasons, but mostly because she genuinely loved her home. Rachel could mock it all she wanted, but Emma's tiny apartment was about to become the crown jewel of a beautifully renovated building. She scheduled individual meetings with each tenant, explaining her plans and ensuring them that improvements would be made with minimal disruption to their lives. Mrs. Chen from 2B had tears in her eyes when Emma explained that the chronic heating problems would finally be fixed. Marcus from 3A, a graduate student who'd been dealing with a leaky ceiling for months, couldn't believe that someone was finally going to address the building's maintenance issues properly. "You're different from the old management company," said Jennifer from 1C. "They treated us like we should be grateful for anything that wasn't completely falling apart. You actually seem to care about making this place better." Emma smiled, realizing that her investment was already paying dividends in ways she hadn't expected. She wasn't just building wealth. She was creating a community where people felt valued and respected. The contrast with her sister's approach to relationships couldn't have been starker. Over the following months, Emma threw herself into the renovation project with an intensity that surprised everyone around her. She hired contractors for the major work, but did much of the planning and coordination herself, learning about everything from HVAC systems to interior design. She upgraded the building's electrical systems, installed new energy-efficient windows, renovated the common areas, and carefully updated each apartment as leases renewed. The transformation was remarkable. The old, tired building began to shine with fresh paint, modern fixtures, and thoughtful touches that made it feel like a place people were proud to call home. Emma's own apartment, with its new hardwood floors and updated kitchen, looked like something from a design magazine. Certainly not the glorified closet Rachel had described. But Emma's favorite part of the renovation was the rooftop garden she created. What had been an unused, ugly space became a community oasis with raised vegetable beds, comfortable seating areas, and string lights that made evening gatherings feel magical. It was here that Emma truly understood what she was building, not just a profitable investment, but a home for herself and others that represented everything Rachel's sterile penthouse lacked: warmth, community, and genuine care. The financial results exceeded even Emma's optimistic projections. By the 6-month mark, she had increased the building's rental income by 35% while keeping all her original tenants happy. New applicants were offering above-asking rent for available units, and the building's appraised value had jumped to $520,000. Emma had created over $140,000 in equity in just half a year. More importantly, she had proven to herself that her vision and hard work could create something beautiful and profitable. She was no longer the struggling little sister Rachel pitied. She was a successful real estate investor with the capital and confidence to pursue much bigger opportunities. And Rachel still had no idea what was coming. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret, her financial advisor. "Emma, I've got news about Prestige Properties. They're more desperate than we thought. Are you ready to make your move?" Emma looked around her transformed building, at the thriving community she'd created, at the solid foundation she'd built for her future. She typed back quickly, "I'm ready. Let's buy Rachel's building." The negotiations for Grandview Towers moved with a swiftness that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Emma sat in her apartment, now beautifully renovated and serving as her home office, coordinating what would be the largest financial transaction of her life. Prestige Properties LLC was indeed in desperate straits, facing bankruptcy and needing to liquidate assets quickly to satisfy creditors. Emma's offer of $1.2 million for a building worth nearly $2 million was initially rejected, but her all-cash proposal and 30-day closing timeline made it increasingly attractive as other potential buyers fell through. Margaret had helped her structure the deal using the equity from 847 Maple Street, a small business loan, and a private investment partner who believed in Emma's vision for transforming underperforming luxury properties. "Emma, I have to ask," Margaret said during one of their planning sessions, "is this really just about the investment opportunity? Because acquiring your sister's building seems quite coincidental." Emma smiled, looking out her window at the thriving community she'd built. "It started as coincidence, but it's become something bigger. Rachel sees the world in terms of who's above and who's below, who deserves respect and who deserves pity. I'm going to show her a different way of thinking about success and relationships." The closing process was complex but exhilarating. Emma found herself learning about commercial real estate law, property management systems, and luxury building operations. She discovered that Grandview Towers, despite its prestigious address and high rents, was poorly managed and desperately in need of both physical improvements and better tenant relations. The building had a 60% occupancy rate, far below its potential, because the previous management had prioritized short-term profits over tenant satisfaction. Apartments were overpriced for their condition, maintenance requests were ignored, and the building's amenities were outdated and poorly maintained. Emma saw immediately that she could increase both occupancy and rental rates by investing in the property and treating tenants with respect. The day Emma took possession of Grandview Towers, she walked through every floor with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She now owned the building where Rachel lived in Penthouse 12A, paying $4,000 monthly for an apartment that was beautiful but overpriced, given the building's problems. Emma held the keys to every unit, including her sister's luxurious home. But Emma's plan wasn't about petty revenge. It was about transformation and justice. She immediately began addressing the building's problems, starting with the broken elevator that had been temporarily out of service for 3 months, and the faulty air conditioning system that left several floors uncomfortably warm during summer months. She also implemented a new management philosophy focused on treating tenants as valued residents rather than simply sources of rent. Emma hired a professional property management team, established clear communication channels for maintenance requests, and began planning comprehensive renovations that would make Grandview Towers the premier luxury building it claimed to be. Word of the building's new ownership spread quickly among tenants, and Emma was amazed by the stories she heard. Rachel, it turned out, had been one of the building's most difficult residents, regularly complaining about other tenants, demanding special treatment, and treating the maintenance staff with open disrespect. Several long-term residents had been considering moving specifically because of the toxic atmosphere Rachel helped create. "The woman in 12A thinks she owns this place," complained Mrs. Patterson from the 8th floor. "She's rude to everyone and acts like she's better than the rest of us just because she pays a higher rent. I hope the new owner does something about tenants who think they can treat others badly." Emma listened to these stories with growing understanding. Rachel's behavior in the building reflected the same attitude she'd shown toward Emma, a belief that financial success gave her the right to look down on others. But Emma was about to teach her sister that true power came with responsibility, and that respect had to be earned through how you treated people, not through how much money you spent. 3 weeks after taking ownership, Emma was ready to reveal herself to Rachel. She had fixed the major building problems, implemented new policies for tenant behavior and community respect, and prepared a comprehensive plan for Rachel's lease renewal. It was time for the conversation that would change everything between them. Emma drafted a formal letter to be delivered to all tenants, announcing the new ownership and management policies. For Rachel's unit specifically, she included an additional notice. Due to multiple complaints about disruptive behavior and violation of community standards, renewal of Lease 12A would require a meeting with building ownership to discuss continued tenancy expectations. Emma scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. in the building's newly renovated community room. She didn't sign the letter with her name, simply E. Thompson, building owner. She wanted to see Rachel's face when she realized who now held the power in their relationship. The anticipation was almost overwhelming. Emma had spent months planning this moment, building the foundation for a confrontation that would finally address years of condescension and cruelty. Rachel had mocked Emma's cheap apartment and humble circumstances, never imagining that her struggling little sister was capable of acquiring the very building where Rachel lived her supposedly superior life. As Emma prepared for the meeting that would reveal everything, she felt a sense of completeness she'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, dignity, and showing Rachel that success meant lifting others up, not tearing them down. Tuesday afternoon arrived with unseasonably warm weather and crystal-clear skies, as if the universe itself was providing the perfect backdrop for Emma's moment of truth. She arrived at Grandview Towers at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes early, wanting to savor every moment of anticipation. The building looked magnificent after 3 weeks of intensive improvements. The lobby gleamed with new marble, the elevator operated smoothly, and fresh flowers adorned every common area. Emma had dressed carefully for this meeting, choosing a professional but understated navy suit that projected authority without ostentation. She carried a leather portfolio containing Rachel's lease renewal documents, tenant complaint records, and the comprehensive building improvement plans she'd implemented. Everything was perfectly organized, just as Emma had learned to organize every aspect of her life over the past year. At exactly 2 p.m., Rachel swept into the community room wearing a designer dress and heels that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her expression was a mixture of irritation and curiosity, clearly annoyed at being summoned by building management, but intrigued by the recent improvements to her living environment. "I don't have much time for this meeting," Rachel announced without preamble, settling into a chair across from Emma's position at the head of the conference table. "I assume this is about my lease renewal. I've been a model tenant, and I expect any renewal to reflect the building's improved conditions with appropriate rent adjustments. Emma looked at her sister, really looked at her, for the first time since that horrible dinner months ago. Rachel appeared exactly the same, impeccably groomed, expensively dressed, radiating the casual confidence that comes from never having been truly challenged or humbled. She still wore her success like armor, still carried herself with the assumption that the world would bend to accommodate her desires. "Thank you for coming, Rachel," Emma said quietly, not yet looking up from her documents. "I wanted to discuss your tenancy here at Grandview Towers, particularly some concerns that have been brought to my attention about your interactions with other residents and staff members." Rachel's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "Concerns? What possible concerns could there be? I pay my rent on time, I don't have parties, and I've never damaged the property. If anything, this building should be grateful to have tenants like me who maintain high standards." Emma finally raised her head, making direct eye contact with her sister for the first time since entering the room. She watched as recognition slowly dawned on Rachel's face, confusion replacing irritation, disbelief replacing confidence. "Hello, Rachel," Emma said simply. "I'm E. Thompson, the new owner of this building. I'm also your landlord." The silence that followed was profound and electric. Rachel's mouth opened and closed several times without producing any sound, her face cycling through expressions of shock, confusion, and growing understanding. Emma had imagined this moment hundreds of times, but the reality was even more satisfying than her fantasies. That's impossible," Rachel finally whispered. "You live in that tiny apartment across town. You work at that little accounting firm. You don't have money for something like this." Emma opened her portfolio and spread documents across the table between them. "Actually, I own that tiny apartment, along with the entire building where it's located. I've owned it for 8 months now. The rental income from that property, combined with some strategic investments and loans, allowed me to purchase Grandview Towers 3 weeks ago. I'm not just your sister anymore, Rachel. I'm your landlord." Rachel stared at the documents, official ownership papers, financial statements, building improvement contracts, as if they were written in a foreign language. "This doesn't make sense. How could you afford any of this? Where did the money come from?" Emma leaned back in her chair, finally feeling the power dynamic shift that she'd worked so hard to create. "The same place your money comes from: hard work, smart decisions, and vision. The difference is that while you were spending your income on designer clothes and expensive dinners to impress people, I was learning about investments and building something lasting." "But your apartment was so small," Rachel said weakly, grasping for the familiar ground of their old relationship. "You were struggling." "My apartment is small," Emma agreed. "But it's also beautiful, efficiently designed, and generates rental income from a building that's increased in value by 40% since I bought it. You called it cheap and pathetic, but it was actually the foundation of everything I've built since then." Rachel's designer handbag slipped from her lap to the floor as the full implications of Emma's revelation began to sink in. "You bought this building because of what I said that night, didn't you? This is all some elaborate revenge scheme." Emma shook her head, though she was smiling now. "I bought this building because it's a good investment that was being poorly managed by owners who didn't understand its potential. The fact that you happen to live here is just a beautiful coincidence. Although, I have to admit, your comments about my living situation did provide some motivation for expanding my portfolio more quickly than I might have otherwise." The documents on the table told the complete story of Emma's transformation. From struggling renter to successful property owner, from the sister Rachel pitied to the woman who now controlled Rachel's housing. Emma had built something genuine and lasting, while Rachel had simply been paying someone else's mortgage in exchange for the illusion of luxury. "Now," Emma continued, her voice taking on a more businesslike tone, "let's discuss your lease renewal and the complaints I've received about your behavior toward other tenants and building staff. My dear friends, I hope you're as amazed by Emma's transformation as I am. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most give us the greatest gifts, the determination to prove them completely wrong. If this story is touching your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're capable of incredible things. I love reading your comments about times when you've overcome others' low expectations. Keep sharing your stories. They inspire me and everyone in our community." The shift in Rachel's demeanor was immediate and profound. The confident, condescending woman who had entered the room 20 minutes earlier seemed to shrink before Emma's eyes, her usual armor of superiority cracking under the weight of this impossible reversal. Emma watched her sister struggle to process the new reality, and for the first time in their relationship, felt a genuine sense of compassion mixed with her satisfaction. "Rachel, let me be clear about something," Emma said, softening her tone slightly. "This isn't about humiliating you the way you humiliated me. This is about running a building properly and ensuring all tenants feel respected and valued. Unfortunately, several residents and staff members have complained about your behavior." Emma opened a file folder and began reading from documented complaints. "Mrs. Patterson from 8B reports that you regularly monopolize the elevator during peak hours, holding it open while you finish phone calls and expecting others to wait. The maintenance staff has filed 3 separate reports about verbal abuse when you've been dissatisfied with response times to non-emergency requests. And last month, you complained to the front desk that families with children were making too much noise in the lobby during afternoon hours, demanding that we implement policies to restrict their access to common areas." Rachel's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Those complaints are ridiculous. I pay premium rent for a premium apartment, and I expect premium service. If I have standards, that's not abuse. That's holding people accountable." "No, Rachel," Emma replied firmly. "That's exactly the attitude that creates problems in a community. Premium rent doesn't give you the right to treat other people poorly. Every resident here deserves respect, regardless of what they pay or where they come from." Emma pulled out another document, this one printed on official letterhead. "This is your lease renewal offer. Your rent will remain the same, but the lease includes new community standards, clauses that all tenants must agree to follow. These include treating all residents and staff with courtesy, respecting shared spaces, and contributing to a positive living environment for everyone." Rachel snatched the document and read through it quickly, her anger building with each clause. "This is harassment. You can't impose behavioral requirements on tenants beyond basic property care. I have rights." "You absolutely have rights," Emma agreed. "You have the right to find housing elsewhere if you can't agree to treat other people with basic human decency. Rachel, this building is now a community, not just a collection of expensive apartments for people to isolate themselves in." The silence stretched between them as Rachel processed the complete reversal of their positions. Emma could see her sister's mind racing, trying to find some way to regain the upper hand, some angle that would restore her sense of superiority, but there wasn't one. Emma now held all the cards, and they both knew it. "How long have you been planning this?" Rachel asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma considered the question carefully. "I wasn't planning any of this when you invited me to dinner 8 months ago. I went there excited to meet your boyfriend and proud of the life I'd built for myself. But when you decided to use my living situation as entertainment, when you mocked my hard work and dreams in front of a stranger, something changed. You showed me that you saw me as less than you, as someone whose struggles were amusing rather than admirable." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion Emma had seen from her all day. "Emma, I didn't mean to hurt you that badly. I was trying to impress David, I guess. I wanted him to see how successful I was in comparison." "By tearing me down?" Emma asked quietly. "Rachel, success isn't about making other people feel small. Real success lifts everyone around you up. The tenants in my original building love living there because I've created a place where people feel valued. The same thing is happening here now. Residents are happier, the staff feels respected, and the building is becoming a real community." Emma stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city where she now owned 2 successful properties and was building something meaningful. "You know what the saddest part is? You could have been part of this. If you'd supported my dreams instead of mocking them, if you'd asked how you could help instead of assuming I was failing, we could have built something together." Rachel joined her at the window, both sisters looking out at the view from the building Emma now owned. "I've been a terrible sister," Rachel said softly. "I was jealous, Emma. Your apartment was small, but it was yours. You seemed so happy there, so proud of what you'd accomplished, and I realized I've never felt that way about anything I've achieved. Everything I have feels empty somehow, like I'm just playing a role. Emma turned to study her sister's profile, seeing vulnerability there for the first time in years. It's not too late to change that, Rachel. But change has to start with how you treat other people. Success without kindness isn't really success at all. It's just expensive loneliness. Rachel nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. Will you really evict me if I don't sign this lease? Emma smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she'd shown her sister all day. I don't want to evict you, Rachel. I want you to become the kind of person who makes this community better, not worse. The choice is entirely yours. Rachel picked up the pen Emma had placed beside the lease documents. As she signed her name, accepting both the renewal terms and the behavioral standards, Emma felt something shift between them, not back to their old relationship, but toward something entirely new and potentially much better. 6 months later, Emma stood on the rooftop garden of 847 Maple Street, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and pink. The evening was perfect for the community barbecue she'd organized, warm enough for people to be comfortable outdoors, but cool enough that no one was complaining about the heat. Around her, tenants from both of her buildings mingled and laughed, their children playing games while adults shared food and stories. The sound of genuine laughter and conversation filled the air, creating a symphony of human connection that Emma had never imagined possible when she first purchased this building out of spite and wounded pride. The transformation in both properties had exceeded even Emma's most ambitious expectations. The original building was now fully occupied with a waiting list of prospective tenants, while Grandview Towers had achieved 95% occupancy and commanded premium rents that reflected its genuine luxury and exceptional management. But more importantly than the financial success, both buildings had become true communities where people knew their neighbors, looked out for each other, and created the kind of meaningful relationships that Emma had always craved but never known how to build. The elderly Mrs. Patterson from the second floor regularly babysat for young couples, while the college students on the third floor helped seniors with their technology problems. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of mutual support and genuine care. Rachel approached Emma with 2 glasses of fresh lemonade, looking more relaxed and genuinely content than Emma had seen her in years. The past 6 months had changed Rachel almost as dramatically as the previous year had changed Emma, transforming her from the superficial, status-obsessed person she'd become into someone who radiated authentic warmth and compassion. She'd gradually begun participating in building activities, volunteering for community projects, and even befriending some of the residents she'd previously looked down upon with such cruel disdain. The change hadn't been immediate or easy. Rachel had fought against her better instincts for months, clinging to old patterns of judgment and superiority. But eventually, the genuine kindness of the community had worn down her defenses. Mrs. Chen wants to know if you'll consider her grandson for the summer internship program, Rachel said, handing Emma one of the glasses with a smile that reached her eyes. He's studying business administration and wants to learn about property management. She's incredibly proud of him, and honestly, after working with him on the tenant newsletter, I think he'd be a fantastic addition to your team. Emma accepted the glass gratefully, the cool condensation a welcome relief against her palm. She was pleased by both the request and the fact that Rachel had become something of an informal liaison between Emma and the tenants of Grandview Towers, helping bridge the gap between management and residents in ways that created trust and open communication. Of course I'll consider him. Mrs. Chen's grandson helped design the new tenant handbook, and he has great ideas about building community engagement. I'd be more than happy to mentor him and help him learn the business from the ground up. Rachel settled into one of the comfortable chairs Emma had arranged on the rooftop, looking out over the thriving community they'd both helped create through months of hard work, genuine care, and countless small acts of kindness. The view was spectacular, not just of the city skyline, but of the people below them, sharing meals and stories and creating memories that would last for years. Emma, I need to tell you something important. David and I broke up 3 months ago. Emma raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised by this news. Throughout all the changes and growth of the past months, she'd assumed Rachel and David were still together, though she'd noticed her sister seemed lighter and happier lately. I'm sorry to hear that, Rachel. What happened between you two?" Rachel laughed, but it was a sound full of relief and liberation rather than bitterness or regret. The sound was so different from her old practiced laughs that Emma barely recognized it as coming from her sister. "He said I'd changed too much, that I wasn't the woman he fell in love with anymore. Apparently, when I stopped being obsessed with appearances and started caring about how I treated people, when I began valuing kindness over status and community over competition, I became less interesting to him. Can you believe that? I realized he was attracted to the absolute worst parts of my personality. The competitiveness, the materialism, the way I used to put other people down just to make myself feel superior and important." Emma reached over and squeezed her sister's hand, feeling a surge of protective love and admiration for the woman Rachel had become. The gesture was natural and easy now, whereas months ago, physical affection between them had felt forced and uncomfortable. Then losing him was the best thing that could have happened to you. Anyone who only loves you for your worst qualities isn't someone worth keeping in your life. Rachel squeezed back, her eyes bright with unshed tears of gratitude and relief. "You know what the strangest part is? I'm happier now than I've ever been in my entire adult life. I wake up excited about my day, about the people I'll meet and the ways I can help. When I was with David, everything was about maintaining this perfect image, about proving I was better than everyone else. It was exhausting and hollow, and I didn't even realize how miserable I was until I stopped living that way." The two sisters sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as their neighbors and friends continued to celebrate the simple joy of community. Emma reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From her sister's cruel mockery of her modest apartment to this moment of genuine connection and mutual respect. The transformation hadn't just been about buildings or money or proving a point. It had been about discovering what really mattered in life and having the courage to build it from the ground up.